All right, you guys ready to jump into the message? Whew, that was close. So I heard a story recently about a high school basketball game that was taking place. It was the quarterfinals, and it was a big game. The team preparing was practicing their shots, practicing their plays, getting their passes down, finalizing the touch with the balls, and getting ready for the big game. The point guard, he was clearly a star. And a couple minutes before the game, somebody walked out of the crowd and approached this young man, none other than Michael Jordan. Can you imagine being 17 years old in the quarterfinals of a basketball game and Michael Jordan's in the stands, comes off of the stands and approaches you and says, "Hey, young man, there's a lot of potential in you. You're a talented player. Could I give you 3 pointers as I was watching you for how your game can go to the next level?" How cool would that be? But the young man looks at Michael and he's like, "MJ, your shoes? Fire. Basketball? I got this. I'm 17. Right? How many of you wish that in that place of your life, that if it got better, everything would get better, that someone wiser than you, further than you, could look into your situation and give you the wisdom and the understanding, the knowledge that you need to take that place to the next level? How many of you would love that to take place? Okay, so there is an invitation today for you to receive just that. In Hebrews 11, there is the Hall of Fame of faith, the people of the Old Testament that finished their stories so well. And God worked in them and moved through them in a very powerful way. And after the list of the Hall of Fame, in chapter 12, it says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses." The cloud of witnesses are the people who are watching on us live our lives. They're in the stands, they're in the crowd, cheering us on. So if you have ever wondered if your loved ones are watching you, this scripture points to the fact that most likely they are aware of what's going on in your life and they're cheering you on. But he continued, he said, "Hey, since you're surrounded, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." And saying, hey, you are actually running with the giants. There's a cloud of witnesses in the stands cheering you on, wanting you to win. But the problem with the crowd is it's hard to hear the voice of the one. So the series is, what if a person from the Old Testament could come out of the clouds and give us some perspective on life to help us walk through the challenges that each and every one of us face. And so today, out of the stands is going to come one of my favorites. And one of the famous prophets, not the most famous, but one of my favorites, it's Elisha. Many of you might have heard of Elijah. Elijah is the most famous prophet of the Old Testament. In fact, Elijah didn't even die. Elijah was so loved by God, so powerful by the hand of God, that a chariot from heaven with angels came down. Elisha gets on the chariot and ascends into heaven. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a pretty good way to end, right? Right, there's no cancer, that's awesome. There's a moment when Elijah was confronted by 3 different small armies, like 50 people, coming to arrest him and most likely just kill him, because there was this crazy woman named Jezebel, and Jezebel was trying to kill all the prophets, and she sent this army, and he called down fire from heaven. He just said, fire falls from heaven, the army is gone, and Elijah's like, what you got? They send another army, same thing. Elijah has recorded 14 miracles just like that one. Epic. In fact, when Jesus revealed to his favorite 3 disciples that he was the Messiah, like they saw the glory of God on Jesus, not just the person of Jesus, but like Jesus, like his face shined like 1,000 suns. And beside him were 2 witnesses. It was Elijah and Moses. In fact, even in Revelation, it says that Elijah and Moses are going to come back as 2 witnesses. Like, Elijah is the MJ of the Old Testament. Elijah's got game. Elisha was his understudy, often misunderstood. However, he didn't just do 14 miracles, he did 28 miracles, but he has half the street cred. And you know why? I think it's because his beginning wasn't great. I think if Elisha could come out of the stands and talk to you today, this is the kind of person he'd want to talk with. For any of you who wonder if your life counts. You ever had that question? Like, does my life matter? Like, is my life really going to make a difference? Like, most of his story, which is why he's not as famous as Elisha, is most of his story was waiting. It was dreaming of what could be. And while he's waiting and dreaming, his 9 to 5 is he's plowing fields. Like, his vantage point from 9 to 5 was that. And it came with all the smells. And he's just like, is my life ever going to be more than this? You ever looked at your life and felt like that's the vantage point? Butts and smells. Any parents and babies in the room? You ever wondered if it matters? You ever had a hard time waking up because you're like, does it even matter? And today, I want to be your pastor. Maybe today you're new to Vibrant. I want to give you maybe even a one-day permission slip to let me be your pastor. And I want to share something with you. That even though you're living in a 9 to 5, even though that your life comes with a ton of views and a whole lot of smells, that God has greatness in you. That you are created in the very image of God, and he wants to reflect his image in your life, in this world, that you would make a massive difference. So, for any of you that wonder if your life counts, here's what he would say. Give your best wherever God puts you. He would say, hey, there's going to come a time when you're just plowing, and it's just day 376 of plowing, and you're just like, does this even matter? And God's watching to see how you're going to respond to it. Are you going to push that plow as hard as you did 375 days ago when you liked the job that you prayed for and asked God for? Now that you have it, you're complaining about it. How are you going to handle the situation at work when the coworker who doesn't believe like you, doesn't think like you, comes against you? Are you going to be defined by love or something different? Are you going to steward the things that God gave you? He would say, hey, if you're asking God for a nicer car, are you taking care of the one that you got? He would say, hey, you can't get along with God until you understand how God works. You're really going to struggle in relationship with God until you understand how God operates. Elisha would come down and say, hey, God's put greatness in you, but before he wants to reveal greatness in you, he's looking to see if you have the potential to express that greatness in. He would say it like this, hey, wherever you are, give your best in obscurity and God will reward it. Yeah, but it doesn't get noticed. Have you ever felt like no one notices you? Have you ever worked twice as hard as someone at work and you got overlooked for the promotion? Have you ever been twice the guy that other guy was, yet he was the one who got the girl? Have you ever thought opportunities in life were going to come to you, but they seem to just keep going to everybody else? Am I talking to anybody today? Have you ever wondered if your life counts? Have you ever felt overlooked? Have you ever felt like you live in obscurity? Elisha would say, hey, when no one else notices, that's when God's paying the closest attention. That the God who's unseen is watching the things that no one else sees. And he's looking for you to get it right. So it says, Elijah went and found Elisha. Elisha, two people. Elijah, say Elijah. Say Elisha. Okay. So Elijah went and found Elisha, son of Shaphat, plowing, be careful how you say that, plowing a field. There were 12 teams of oxen in the field, and Elisha was plowing with the 12th team. Elisha is a wealthy man. If you have 12 teams of oxen, like if you have oxen at all, let alone 12, he's a wealthy dude. Elisha went over to him, and he threw his cloak across his shoulders, and then he walked away. So the moment when Elisha, he walks up to Elisha, Elisha's walking up to Elisha, he's plowing the field. Elisha comes up behind him and throws his cloak on him, which is kind of like a job offer. It's like, hey, I think you could do what I do. Come learn from me. This is the first time they met. Now, Elisha has certainly heard of Elijah because there's been 14 recorded miracles. Like, Elijah has street cred. He also comes with a sentence. So Elisha is faced with this question. Do I go down the road of the job offer and potentially seeing God do something great in my life, but the crazy, wicked queen might kill me? Or do I just stay plowing? And it says that there was 10 years after this moment. For 10 years, Elisha knows that he's been called by God. For 10 years, there's a dream inside of him. And he's plowing in obscurity. Elisha would say, and when you feel unnoticed, and you're just being faithful, the God who's unseen sees everything that no one else sees, and he's looking to reward it. When I got out of Bible college, I thought it would go a different way. I went to Bible school, which is a private university, which means you borrow money, spend a lot of money to get a private education, and then I leave Bible school to be a volunteer youth pastor for 5 years. Jonna and I are financing youth ministry out of our own pockets. And then the full-time job becomes a full-time job, and the construction job that I have, I compared the paycheck from construction to the one that required a degree and the one that just required a showed up. I'm like, man, my new paycheck's an embarrassment. For 15 years, I served other people's ministry, helping them flourish. 15 years. I was known as the fixer. I joined a church plant kind of like this one. It was young like this one too. I jumped in about the 6-month mark. And he's like, hey, our production is terrible. I'm like, I got it. Pick me. Put me in, coach. What do you know about production? Nothing, but I'm a fast learner. And I learned the lights. I didn't do them right. I just we went to another level. And then people started being like, man, our services sure did get a lot better. I'd be like, it's because your boy. Seen by nobody. Everyone's like, Pastor, you're doing such a great job. I'm like, he is doing a great job, but no one sees this. No one beat me when we would load in. No one beat me there. I was the first guy there, last one to leave. I'm like, hey, the hardest jobs, pick me. Put me in. Set up the kids ministry, I'll go set up the kids ministry. Set up production, that stuff's really heavy. I'll go set up the production. I'll go do all the things that no one else wants to do. Put me in, coach. And then someone else gets hired. And then another someone else gets hired. And our youth ministry is blowing up. Like our whole little town, not city, our whole little town is talking about what God's doing in our youth ministry. Then I get called to this church in Alabama who's going through this difficult situation. Their founding pastor had a moral failure. The youth pastor overnight becomes the lead pastor. The church is dwindling in its size. It used to be a big church. Now it's not that big of a church. Finances are kind of crashing in, and I jump in, and I'm like, hey, what do you need? He's like, can you fix the youth ministry? Got it. Youth ministry starts growing. Hey, once again, hey, we don't really have a production team. Hey, I know a little bit about production now after about 5 years. Let me jump in. I went and built the team, restructured all of their production, and then the pastor is so overwhelmed by the stress of this challenging church situation that his diabetes goes nuts. And once a month on either Friday or Saturday, I would get a text message or a phone call saying, hey, you're up tomorrow. Now, I don't know what you know about preaching a message. You don't just show up tomorrow. And the message I wrote for the teenagers on Wednesday wasn't going to work on Sunday with all their parents. And the church started growing again. And it got to the place where the church was in such a financial position that I looked across the table from our lead pastor and I said, hey, I think you need to hire an executive pastor to come in and manage the business side of the church, because this church won't exist anymore if we don't pay our mortgage and we don't pay our insurance bill and we don't have a budget that's working and we don't have accounting that's working. He's like, I can't afford that. I'm like, you could afford it if you let me go. 2 days later, I get a phone call from a church in Kansas City saying, hey, if you would come work for us for 5 years, we'll send you out to plant a church. Convenient timing, thank you. Go to Kansas City, thinking I'm going to be the youth pastor. Jump in, youth ministry starts growing. He's like, hey, our youth ministry is struggling. Fix it, okay? Hey, we used to have an internship. Would you start a new internship? Absolutely, I'm your guy. Hey, our production, man, I'm seeing a trend here. Our production's really kind of struggling. Can you jump into our production team and like kind of help us get to the next level? Oh, sure. Hey, our kids ministry is kind of struggling. I actually volunteered for this one. 500 kids a weekend, 3 campuses, 6 services. I'm like, I know nothing about kids ministry, but I know a lot about teams. And right now what's hurting is not our kids' rooms. It's we don't have enough people in a room. But I know how to build a team. So while we're hiring a kids pastor, let me jump in here. And I find myself no longer preaching for about a year and a half right before I'm getting ready to go plant a church. And I'm freaking out. Hidden in the corner of a kids ministry while there's some dreams alive inside of me. And Jesus said, for all of you that feel like you're in an obscure place, feel overlooked, feel unseen, he said, hey, here's your hope. Your Father who sees what is done in secret, he'll reward you. And then he goes on and gives 3 examples. He says, hey, so when you pray, do it in secret. Don't be like the other guys that go to the street corners and they're like, have you ever met this person that like they'll remind you they spend an hour with God every day? Thus, Lord, holy is thy name. You are holy and righteous and pure, and your name is great. And you're like, I can't pray like that guy. Jesus said, don't pray like that guy. Go to the secret place where it's just you and God, and you pray in that place. He said, hey, when you pray, when you fast, don't remind everyone, hey, man, I'm so hungry, I'm so spiritual, I'm a fasting genius. Like, I'm really, like, no one thinks they're good at fasting, by the way. That's part of the point. You kind of get hungry. But Jesus said, hey, when you fast, hey, put oils on your face so you just look like it's a normal day. Fast in secret. And they said, and for everybody else, when you give in secret. Don't be like, watch this. Your boy's not giving Washingtons today. I got some Benjamins. He said, don't live that way. Jesus like, that's gross. So I don't know. How many of you anybody grew up in church where they had the thrones on the stage? Anyone know what I'm talking about? If you didn't, you're lucky. You're blessed, actually. And I remember asking my dad one time, Dad, why do they sit on the stage? He's like, they watch who puts money in the bucket when it goes by. It wasn't true, but I think my dad was messing with me, but I believed it. So I made sure I brought my dollar every Sunday, and I made eye contact with the associate pastor on the stage. I'm like, and then we did this thing called Faith Promise, and I didn't get it as a kid, and they didn't do it with the wrong motives, but they had this treasure chest on the front. They do these Hope, Faith Promise. I don't remember what it's called exactly, but this treasure chest, and there was this moment where you'd come and you'd bring your offering, and everyone would watch you put something in. Jesus said, hey, when you do it that way, you've already gotten your reward. Hey, and when you give, he's like, hey, you should pray, you should fast, and you should give, but do it in secret. Do it for God's recognition, not man's. Elisha would say, hey, until you're willing to be hidden and content, you're not ready to be promoted by God. Until you're willing to be hidden and unseen and feel undervalued, but find your recognition in God and God alone, and your identity is not in a title, it's not in a position, it's not in an income level, it's not in the size of house you have, it's not in the car that you drive, but your contentment and value is found in God alone. He says, oh, that's when God's looking to promote somebody. Elisha would say, hey, give your best in small things, and God will give you bigger things to do. I was taught this really early as a kid. I had great parents that taught this principle. They taught me, hey, do a few things and do them extremely well. And when I went to plant a church, I was looking at all the different things you could do as a church. I once went to a church where they had like 139 ministries. I'm like, how do you divide a budget around 139 ministries? So I'm not that smart. So Vibrant, we just do 4 things. We do Sunday services, we do growth track, we do connect groups, and we do dream team. And that's it. But here's my promise. Hey, those 4 things, and we're gonna do them extremely well. We're just gonna keep working on those things and make them great. Because we believe that, hey, if you know God, like you know him, if you find freedom in God, like you're really free from that place that keeps coming back in your path. Hey, if you discover your purpose, that your purpose is aligning your purpose with God's purpose, the thing that he created in you to do is actually part of what he was trying to do in bringing the kingdom of heaven to earth. Oh, and you know your purpose. Oh, when you start serving, being on the dream team, when you live a life that's something bigger than you, you'll find contentment and fulfillment in God. He said, hey, when you're faithful and doing small things, God will give you bigger things. So Elisha returned to the oxen and he slaughtered them. That's a little over the top, don't you think? Like he killed them. And then he used the wood from the plow to build a fire and roast the flesh. Like, couldn't he have just given it away? Somebody else probably would have loved 12 pairs of oxen. Look at this. Then he went to Elijah to be a great prophet. No, to be his assistant. He walked away from lots of money to be a servant. He went to Elisha as his professional hand washer. That's the only thing you really read about until a later scene. Like, he's just like walking around with his fanny pack following Elisha. Elisha's like doing miracles, calling fire down from heaven. He's like, oh, do you need some like hand sanitizer? I got you. See, I learned at a young age that little things matter. My dad owns a construction company in the Midwest, which means every day is muddy. Like, if it rains, it's going to be muddy. Yet if you were to go into my dad's truck on any given day, you could eat off the floorboards. Like, the standard of cleanliness in his truck was a little bit extra. But I learned to value the details that no one else sees. If you were to walk into his construction trailer, every tool had its place. It was labeled. It was easy to find things. Tools were taken care of. I remember getting in trouble for leaving a tool in the grade. For all the construction people in the room, you know what I just said. If you didn't, that just means you left it in the dirt. But if you're in construction, it's the grade. Don't leave it in the grade. I learned at an early age, if you take care of stuff, if you steward what God gave you, God will give you some more. You know, I love pouring into and raising up young anointed people. It's part of my calling. I'm called to plant the church. My favorite thing to do is raise up leaders. Raise up people who love the house of God, the person of God, and love to lead the people of God. And one of the things I want to always am trying to teach, hey, learn to care for your stuff. Like, the side compartment of your car is not a trash can. It's for your umbrella. Hey, show up early. Like, on time's late. I know that's not South Florida culture, but that's paying attention to detail. I'm just going to pass on right by that one. I feel like I've stepped on enough toes already today. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. This is Jesus. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. He said, hey, your stuff, your money, your relationships, they're amplifiers. It's all an amplifier. If you're generous with a little, you'll be generous with much. If you're faithful with a little, you'll be faithful with much. If you're stingy with a little, you'll just be more stingy with much. You say, give your best in the natural, and God will do the supernatural. Because some of you, that's why you're here today. You've done everything you can in the natural, but you need God to do something. Elisha was faithful for 10 years as a professional hand washer. And he would say this, hey, don't just tithe when it fits in the budget. Tithe because God said to. Don't just serve when your schedule aligns. Serve because he's what he's called you to. I was a youth pastor for about 15 years, and I was always shocked when the parents would often come up to me shocked as their kids went into college, like, my kid doesn't love God. They love sports, and they love their career, and they love their education. I'm like, hey, did your kid ever miss a ball game because of church or God? No. Did he ever miss church and God because of a ball game? Every time. And now you wonder why they don't value God, but they value their career and their athletics? You taught them that. Well, fix them. You should have had them here 5 years ago. I can't fix anybody. But as parents, we are teaching our kids what they should and shouldn't value, and what they should prioritize and what they should make less than. For Elisha to follow Elijah was risking his life. For 10 years, hand sanitizer. But when they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken away from you? He's like, hey, what do you want? You've been faithful for 10 years. What do you want? Ask anything. He says, let me inherit a double portion of your spirit. Whew, that's a bold prayer. It's like, you did 14 recorded miracles. Double. God is looking for some people to pray some bold prayers, where your life is bigger than just you. Today's an invitation to pray some bold prayers. Not, God, bless my food. Bless my day. Give me your presence so I have butterflies in my tummy. Not those. No, Elisha went for it. He said, hey, go to God and say, God, I pray that my life would matter. I pray that you would use me today. I pray that you'd put people in my path that I can love and encourage and bless and give hope to. God, would you use me in my workplace today? Would you use me in my marriage today? God, would you help me as I parent my kids to raise them to love you and value you and value your ways? God, would you do something great in my generation? And God, would you put me in, coach? Elisha would say, pray some bold prayers. Elisha replied, you have asked a difficult thing. Elijah said, yet, if you see me when I'm taken away from you, it'll be yours. Otherwise, well, all Elisha had to do was ask. I wonder how many of us have stopped asking God for big things. I wonder how many of us insult God by only praying small prayers. In fact, let me ask you this. If God answered all your prayers, would anyone else but your life be changed? What I'm asking God for? Something God spoke to me. I'm asking God that throughout the life of Vibrant, we'd have 100,000 salvations, that 100,000 people would come to Jesus and respond to the gospel because of faithful people like you. Come on, that's exciting. Pastor B, does that mean you're all about the numbers? Like, is it really about the number? Well, do you count all your kids when they get in your vehicle? Well, it's really about the quality of the parenting more than it is about every kid getting in it. Now, we believe that every number has a name, every name has a story, and every story matters to God. And if their name and story matters to God, it matters to us. And they're way more than a number. They're a story, and there's a better story, and Jesus wants to transform their story, and that happens in the vehicle of the local church. And that's worth your life. I've got a dream of a dream center, a place where, a building that's not necessarily even owned by Vibrant, where women who are in sex trafficking can come get free. Like, we'll pay for everything. Drug addicts can come get clean. Homeless veterans can find help. And we just pay for it. I've got a dream of a school where we raise kids not in the ideologies and the worldview of our government, but in the worldview and the ways of God. Teaching them they're valued by God, that their life matters, that it counts. That God, before they were ever born, wrote every day of their life, and their life matters to Him. I've got a dream of a school. And Jesus said, hey, whoever believes in me will do the works that I have been doing. And they will do even greater things than these because I'm going to the Father. This is Jesus' promise to you. You may ask me for anything in my name and I'll do it. Yeah, but Pastor B, what if nothing happens? Well, then your life is the same. But what if something happens? What if God answered your prayers because you were faithful in the place of prayer for 10 years? Everything would be different. And Jesus would later say, hey, when you ask, make sure you ask for the right motive. God, give me a bigger house, a bigger car, and better vacations and more money so my life could be better. No. God, I pray that my life would count. I pray that it would make a difference in my city and in my workplace. That when people need a place of hope, that my name would come to their mind because of the way I treated them all day long, all week long, all year long. You see, Elisha's big prayer set up 28 miracles, second only to Jesus. I think if Elisha would take a lap with us, his final words of encouragement would be this: learn how to cultivate the presence of God in your life. Learn how to get close to God. Because when you get close to God, he speaks things to you. He puts big dreams and big prayers inside of you. In fact, there was a moment when the king of Israel, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom went to fight the king of Moab. And on their way to go fight the king of Moab, they ran out of water. Which means your army can die in 3 days. Everybody can die in 3 days. You can last 3 days without water. They're in trouble. They've rejected the prophets of Israel. They've stopped following the ways of God. And in their moment of distress, you know what they asked? Is there anyone in our country who hears from God? And one of them was like, oh, remember that Elijah's servant guy, like Elisha? I heard that he hears from God. Which is why it's so important for you not to let culture shape you. Because culture will always fail. People who go down the road of culture and following the whim of whatever's being taught by whoever outside of God, that system will fail. And when it fails, they will look for someone that hears from something bigger than them. In fact, I was just talking to one of my friends, D'Angelo, this week. He's like, I get that text message all the time from my friends who I was right beside them doing crazy stuff. And now years later, they're texting me saying, hey, can you help me? So in the moment when the kings are like, we need water. I love what Elisha says. This is so crazy. He's like, now bring me a harpist. Like, what, do you need mood music? Like, what's up? For real? But while the harpist was playing, the hand of the Lord came upon Elisha. See, Elisha knew that worship would get him in the presence of God. He knew that his heart could be aligned when he started worshiping. He knew that he could hear clearly when he would be in the place of worship, because he'd been there before. He knew how to get close to God. And in that moment, when that person texts you, you need to know how to get in the presence of God. You need to know how to cultivate the presence of God. You want to hear God? Worship with your whole heart. Pastor B, I've never heard God speak. Have you ever had a dream? You might not have articulated that it was something that God gave you in your spirit that formed a thought, but that thing that like, hey, well, how can the world be better because you're on this planet? That's not a thought that came from you. That's a thought that came from God. Dreams are the language of God. And you don't see them here. You see them in your spirit because you spend time in the presence of God. Elisha would tell us, hey, dreams are birthed in God's presence. Hey, when you understand worship, you'll hear God. In fact, God has so much for you, but the only way you'll know what he has for you is if you get close to him. In fact, in the New Testament, after the disciples, Jesus has been killed, he's ascended into heaven. His disciples, it says, when they saw the courage of Peter and John, two of Jesus' disciples, and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note. Not in their pedigree, not in their bank account, not in the letters that came before or after their name. They'd been with Jesus. What set them apart was they spent time with God. What sets you apart from this world, what sets you up for a moment where God speaks to you, is when you just go spend time in his presence. Every dream that God's given me has come in the moments when I've just spent time in prayer and fasting. This church, the name Vibrant, came while I was praying and fasting for 21 days with my wife. Before anyone knew this was even going to be a thing, before we even knew where we were going to go in America, we didn't know. God said vibrant. I looked at the definition of vibrant, like, oh, that's it. Vibrant? We're just getting started. And the dream in Jonna and I is that you would go out and fulfill the dreams that God speaks to you in the secret place as you get close to him. But as he gives you a dream, the second thing Elisha would tell you is, hey, at some point you have to wake up and do something. Like you can't just dream. I'm just waiting on God, Pastor B. Now God's waiting on you to do something. God's waiting on you to be faithful in obscurity before he gives you the dream. Because you can't be trusted with the dream until you're willing to hold hand washing materials with a smile for a long period of time. Will you be faithful in obscurity? Will you find your contentment, your security, and your value in the presence of God and not in a title or a role or an income or the letters after your name or before your name? What if you found it in him? And from that place, you pursued those other things. We need some people right now that have a desire to serve in kids. Not because we're short people. We just need more people to influence the young people because I believe God's going to grow our church. I believe that God wants to send more kids to our church, that more kids grow in his way and in his word and know God on a personal level, that know his voice and know his presence. And we're going to need some people to love them and care for them and disciple them and teach them to do that. Hey, we need some people that are willing to greet people. You know what I tell our greeters? Hey, your job is when someone comes new to Vibrant, they're like this. They might not physically be doing this. Often they are. Your job is just to get them to do this. Hey, no one's here to judge you. Convince them that we're for them because we are. Convince them that God's for them because he is. That now that they're going to come into the service and their defenses are down, now they're going to be open to receive and hear from God, which is why we did all this anyways. Hey, we need some people that are willing to load in. Load in as we show up here at 6:30 in the morning on Sunday and we set it all up. We need some people. You're like, I don't have a lot of skills. Can you show up at 6:30? We'll teach you. I'm kind of busy, Pastor B. I'm kind of like sleepy on Saturday because I watched Netflix until 1 a.m. And you can stay and wondering if your life will matter. Come play an instrument. And you'll find the secret. Hey, we teach our dream team this. It's worship one, serve one. We actually have a service at 9 o'clock. But only our dream team gets to come. So before they go and serve wherever it is that they're going to serve, they get to come and hear a message for them. It's a unique message just for them. They get to come in and worship, and from that place, go and serve. And sometimes, I got to be honest with you, the 9 o'clock dream team service is the best service. Now, Elisha, back to Elisha. I have 1 minute. Elisha in worship. And he said, this is what the Lord says, go make a valley full of ditches. Wait, you needed mood music and now you want us to go dig a hole? It's not going to rain. There's no clouds in the sky. Well, you can trust what you understand and what you see about clouds being in the sky, or you can trust God and go dig some ditches. But it's your choice. You see, because dreams must go from inspiration to activation. In fact, the brother of Jesus, I don't know, but if you have a sibling, what would it take for your brother to convince you he was God? The brother of Jesus said faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. For some of you, if you're completely honest, your faith feels dead. And it might be because you're sitting on the sidelines and you're not activating faith. For some of you, the reason that God seems distant is because your whole life is about you. And God wants to open up your eyes to see a vision of something that's bigger than you, that he could reveal his glory and his goodness and his faithfulness through you. But if you live a life that's all about the 9 to 5 and you pray small prayers and you live a life all about you, your family, your kids, your dreams, your ambitions, at some point your faith will die. Elisha, for this is what the Lord says. You'll see neither wind nor rain. It's not going to come in the way that you think it's going to come. Yet this valley will be full of water. And you and your cattle and your other animals, they're going to drink. Because God said it. He goes, hey, this is an easy thing in the eyes of the Lord. And oh, you didn't ask for this? But if you're faithful to go dig some ditches, he'll also hand Moab over to you, which is the reason you're here to begin with. Many of you are discouraged right now, even in your faith, because you don't see what you thought you should see by now. Elisha would say, hey, just because you don't see it doesn't mean that God isn't doing something in the background. Because God rewards the things that are done in obscurity. God rewards faith when there's not a cloud in the sky and you're digging ditches. For some of you, you actually see the opposite of what you asked for. When my wife and I moved here to Sunrise, we had a list of 10 places we were going to go. All 10 places said no. We couldn't meet there as a church. 10 no's. 10. And at the last no, someone said, hey, I want to introduce you to somebody. It's a principal of a school that wasn't even on my list. If I'd only trusted in what I saw, we wouldn't have started. The last thing he'd tell us, hey, don't base your life on what is seen but the unseen. And hear me, I thought I'd have a staff by now. I thought our church would be able to provide my family health insurance by now. I thought we'd need 2 services by now. God, you spoke 100,000 salvations. You said a dream center. You spoke a school. I can either trust in what I see, or I can trust in what God said. For some of you today, you've believed the lie that your life doesn't matter, that you're going to spend your life unnoticed, and then what you have to offer God is not important. But before you ever had lived a single day of your life, before you were ever born, God wrote in his book, oh, the plans I have for this person, the dreams I want to put inside of them, the prayers I want them to pray, the faithfulness I want them to walk into. That's the heart of God towards you. Father, right now I pray, God, that you would stir faith. That we wouldn't just believe and trust what we see, but we would believe and trust what you said. And Father, I pray that as we get close to you, that you'd birth dreams inside of us. And you would teach us to trust not just in what we see, but what you've said. That we would be okay living in obscurity because we believe that you reward it. and that it's our privilege to give our lives back to you and say, God, spend my life how you see fit. In Jesus' name, amen.